Hello, thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about The Watchers by A.M. Shine, released in 2021, and I'm comparing it with the movie directed by Ishana Shyamalan, which was released in 2024. And yes, she is the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan. And since this is a new release, I will have a spoiler-free review. And to be honest, I did not like this movie. I didn't like the book either, but because I didn't like the book, I assumed it would be pretty easy for the movie to be better, but I was wrong because I thought this was pretty bad. The acting is nothing special. It has very poor character development. The script itself was poorly done because we get so much pointless information early on that seems important, but then it never comes into play later. And then the ending was stupid. We do get some cool, creepy imagery that I thought was effective, but aside from that, yeah, I was just very disappointed with this movie. And like I said, the book I didn't like either. I found it very lackluster. Despite it being a thriller, I did not find it thrilling. And I wasn't that connected to the characters in the book either. And there was also something that is supposed to be a big reveal, like kind of near the end of the book. And it was so obvious, and so it did not come as a surprise. And so yeah, basically I would not recommend the book or the movie. I will say the book does have a fair amount of positive reviews. So just because I didn't like it, who am I? Go ahead and check it out for yourself and maybe you'll like it. And with the movie, I don't like encouraging people to not go to theaters, right? Because movies are struggling enough as it is to do well in theaters. And I love going to the theater. So if you're curious enough about this, yeah, go ahead. Go see it in theaters. I'm not going to talk you out of it. I personally was just very underwhelmed and disappointed. Like honestly, Tarot is another movie that came out recently that got horrible reviews, but that was one that I actually kind of enjoyed to some extent. And I thought it was more effective and creepy and scary and better done as far as like the imagery in some ways. But also that movie did not take itself very seriously, and so you could just have fun watching it. Whereas this took itself very seriously. But yeah, regardless of how you feel about The Watchers, whether you agree or disagree with me, comment down below, let me know. We can talk about it. And I definitely am not someone who needs everyone to agree with me. I like hearing people who have differing views than mine, because what a boring world it would be, right? If we all liked the same things. So yeah, if you have differing views than mine, or if you agree with me, either way, comment down below and let's talk about The Watchers. But going forward, I will get into the details of the plot, which means we will have spoilers. So in both book and movie, our main character is Mina, and she doesn't have a relationship with anyone. We find out that her mom died, and in the movie, we find out that her mom died 15 years prior, and later in the movie, we find out that it was her fault that her mom died. Turns out she was a really annoying kid, basically. But ever since the death of her mom, she has just been very guarded and doesn't let people in, including her sister, and so her sister tries to reach out, but Mina just doesn't want a relationship with her because it's just too painful. In the book, her mom had died of some kind of illness, and she and her mom were close, but then after the mom dies, she and her sister kind of part ways, and she's just not interested in having a relationship. And the sister had promised their dying mom that she would look after Mina, and so she feels like it's her responsibility to call and check in on Mina. However, the sister is beginning to not care because Mina doesn't care, you know? And so basically, yeah, she doesn't have anyone she's close to. And in both book and movie, early on, she is delivering this special bird to someone. In the movie, she works for a pet store, and so that is why she is delivering this bird. Whereas in the book, she is just a struggling artist, and the way she makes money is this guy she knows who just gives her these random odd jobs to help her keep afloat, and her delivering this bird is one of those odd jobs she does for him. But while she is delivering this bird out into the middle of nowhere, her car breaks down, and so she's walking to try to find help and find the person who's getting this bird. She's walking in the woods when suddenly it gets darker and darker, and then eventually she sees this giant concrete structure, which we find out is called the coop. And there is a woman in the doorway who we find out is named Madeline, and she is telling Mina, like, hurry and get inside because it's getting dark and it's going to be dangerous. And so Mina is able to run inside, and in the coop, there is one other woman, Kiara, and a young guy named Daniel, along with Madeline, this older woman. And in the movie, like right away, they tell her that they need to stand in line, and there's this giant mirror, and they tell her that on the other side it's glass, and there are some something called the Watchers on the outside, and they need to see that the four of them are here, and that Mina, they need to see that she is a new member. And so they have her step a little forward, and then we hear applause, and Mina is asking what it is, and they say that they are clapping for Mina because they're happy about her arrival, I guess. And then from here we cut to the morning, and Mina is like, I'm out of here. However, people, once they arrive to the coop, they are stuck there because you can't get out of the woods in time before dark falls, and once darkness falls, the Watchers show up and then you die, and so nobody can escape. But Mina tries to get out in time when Madeline tells her, like, you're stuck here, like there's no way out. And so then she goes back to the coop, and that is where she lives for the next couple of months. And in the movie, when they cut away after this first night and we just cut to the morning, that was so abrupt. Like, this is her first night here and we're not even seeing it. We just see them standing in a line and the Watchers applause, and then we cut away. Am I the only one who wanted to see more from her first night? Like, why? It makes no sense to me, the fact that we didn't get a look into this first night when she's officially meeting everybody and being like, what is going on here? But yeah, so that seemed very abrupt. But later in the movie, there's a part where Daniel is talking to the Watchers and he's kind of putting on a performance, being silly, being like, we've got a great show planned for you tonight. Like, what's gonna happen? Ooh. And then at another point, Kiara is like, oh, they like it when I dance. And so she puts music on and dances in front of the glass. And all of these details where they stand to like present themselves, as well as them putting on a show and dancing, all of these details are not in the book. In the book, the coop, it does have this two-way glass that looks like a mirror on their end, but they don't need to stand in line, or they just go about their normal life as normal as they can, right? And so all of these details of them specifically talking to the Watchers and putting on a show for them and having to present themselves, yeah, none of that was in the book. And had I not read the book, the part with the applause definitely would have piqued my interest, and I would have just been like, what is going on here? And even with Daniel and Kiara, you know, performing for the Watchers, I definitely would have been like, what's happening right now, you know? However, because I knew what the Watchers are and where the story was going to go, assuming it followed the book, this just came across as silly, and I didn't like it. And it's funny because had I not read the book, this movie would have intrigued me from the start, but ultimately I would have felt disappointed by the end. But because I read the book, I was just disappointed right from the start. But in the movie, their lack of food doesn't really seem to be an issue. Like, we see them setting bird traps and we see them scrounging in the forest, and yeah, it seems like they're eating fine, I guess. Whereas in the book, this was a huge deal. Like, food and water was a huge concern, and all of them were severely malnourished because oftentimes the bird traps didn't even catch birds, and all they had to eat were like berries and nuts. And then another difference is that in the movie, they tell Mina the rules of the coop and they recite it in unison. And this too just felt so cheesy and stupid. And then the rules also kind of don't serve a purpose. Like, I guess they're all things Madeline came up with, so it kind of makes sense, but ultimately none of the rules seem that important and the rules were not in the book. But then also there's a part when they're out, like, you know, finding things in the forest, and Kiara makes a point to tell her like, oh, we pick this type of herb and it helps with this specific illness. And like later we see Mina picking up that herb, and it seems like, oh, like this herb is going to be important later on, so we need to make a mental note of this. But no, it never comes into play and it doesn't matter at all. So I don't know why they kind of showed it as being like this key thing. But in the book, right from the start, that first night when they're in the coop, the Watchers are like clawing and trying to get in through the door. Whereas in the movie, the Watchers seem pretty peaceful initially and they're not clawing and trying to get in. But to talk about Madeline, so in the book, Madeline was just very gruff and rude to the others, and she was very belittling to Kiara and Daniel. When she meets Mina, she can see that Mina is tougher and more useful than Kiara and Daniel, so she isn't quite as belittling, but she is still very rude and gruff, and she also is very stoic and seems to just not have any emotion whatsoever. However, over the course of time, Mina does learn to respect Madeline because Madeline has been there the longest, and she is the one keeping them together and keeping them alive. Whereas in the movie, I mean, Madeline definitely is pretty stoic in the movie and very rigid, but she didn't come across quite as rude and belittling as she did in the book. But in both book and movie, eventually we find out that Madeline chose to go to this forest. She sought it out because she read about the creatures that lived here. And then the coop, this was a structure that existed before she arrived, and she finds it, and this structure, this coop, is what keeps her alive ultimately, but she wasn't the one who built it. And basically we find out that the Watchers are these changelings, like these fairies, and in their true form they are just very long and lean, but they can mimic humans, so they can look look and act like people that they see. And in the book, we also hear that they eat humans, so that is why they are trying to get into the coop. But at one point, Daniel is outside with Madeline in the book, and he steals her keys, and then he runs inside, and Mina is in the coop, and he tells her that he has locked Madeline out. And he's like, something is fishy about her. I don't trust her. Something's off. But Mina thinks that he is just acting irrational, so she goes outside to find Madeline, but then Daniel locks both of them out. And so they're standing outside as darkness is falling, and they're knocking, being like, please let us in. And eventually Kiara is the one that opens the door and lets them in. Whereas in the movie, Daniel tied Madeline up, and then Mina finds her and unties her. And while she is untying her, Daniel locks her and Madeline out of the coop. And then when they're knocking to be let in, Mina is the one that tells him, like, you know, I was the cause of my mom's death. And when you have someone else's blood on your hands, like, you can never be rid of it. And so she's like, trust me, Daniel, you don't want our death on your hands. You need to let us in. And so he does. But prior to letting them in, they had been crouching in the woods, and they do see a watcher. It's like kind of a silhouette, but we get a good look at them and we hear their scream. And I did think this was a creepy and effective scene. But also there is a scene unique to the movie where Mina finds a burrow. The burrow are where the watchers go during the day. And she is with Daniel, and she gets his help to like rappel down into the burrow. And there she finds a bicycle, and she brings it back up, and she shows it to Madeline, and she's like, you say we can't walk fast enough to get out of the woods before nightfall, but with a bicycle, this solves our problem. However, the watchers end up going extra crazy that night, and they're clawing to get inside, which, remember, in the movie, they don't do that every night, but they do this night. And so Madeline is like, it's because you went down into the burrow, and now they're upset. And so the next day, they lower the bicycle back into the burrow as a way to appease the watchers. But eventually, in both book and movie, the watchers are just going so crazy that they feel like the coop is no longer safe, and that eventually they are going to shatter the glass. And then the door, they are also going crazy at the door, so they push the table up to reinforce the strength of the door, and that is when they see something that had been below the table, and they see it's like this covering, but when they remove the covering, they see that it is a door to a bunker. So they go down into this bunker, and inside is like everything they could want. Like, it's an actual bed, and there's tons of food, and remember in the book they were starving, so seeing all of this canned food, they just go crazy and eat a ton of it. Also in the movie, at this point when the watchers are going crazy, they start mimicking the voices of Daniel and Mina and Kiara and Madeline. And this is the first time that Daniel and Kiara find out that they can mimic humans, but they've been there for like 8 to 6 months-ish. Like, how had they never heard the watchers do this before? I don't know. I guess Mina going into the burrow is what set them off, but it seems like if you've been there for nearly a year, you would have known this by now, but they didn't. Anyway, down in the bunker, in both book and movie, there is a computer, and on the computer are recordings. So in the book, it is just one video of recording, and they open it up, and it is this professor named Kilmarten, and he is the one who created the bunker and the coop, and he talks about how he had it built by these day workers, and once night fell, he would like go down into the bunker they were working on, and all of the workers would be killed by the watchers, and then the next day, he brought new men in, and the same thing happened. But he set this up because he wanted to observe the watchers and give the watchers a chance to observe him, which is why he put that glass in the coop. However, at this point, it is near the end of his stay, and he feels like he's going crazy and that this was all a huge mistake. And he's like, I'm seeing things that can't possibly be true, like this is horrible. And he says that he had created an escape plan for himself when he was done with this experiment, where he hid a boat by a river, which was a day's journey away. And so you have time to reach it before nightfall. And then you hop on the boat, put it in the river, and then it gets you out. But he's injured, so he can't make the trip anymore. So he's telling the viewer, if you're watching this, go use that boat and you can escape yourself. Whereas in the movie, there are multiple recordings. So we see him from the beginning of his stay to the end. And in the beginning, he is very cocky. And he's sharing a lot of the same stuff we got in the book. But in the movie, at one point, we also see that he brings a watcher down into the bunker with him, which was not the case in the book. And then at the end, he tells them about the boat. And then he's like, I've made a huge mistake with this. And he's like, I have 2 bullets left, one for me and one for the watcher that I brought in here. And so he tells them that he is going to end his life and the life of this watcher. He goes upstairs and we hear 2 gunshots. And then from here in the movie, Mina is like, okay, we're leaving tomorrow. We're going to go to that boat. Whereas in the book, Kiara and Daniel especially, they thought this was awesome, this bunker with all this food. And so they're fine staying here for a while now that they have this new great home. But Madeline is the one that's like, we need to leave in the morning. And they're surprised, being like, what? Like, we should wait till summertime when we have more time? Like, we just found this great place with all this food. Why do you want to leave? But Madeline doesn't really give them a choice. And she's like, I'm leaving tomorrow. You can come with me or you can stay. And so basically they feel they have no choice but to leave with Madeline in the morning. And so in both book and movie, they reach the river and the boat in time. However, darkness is falling. And right at the last minute, Daniel sees a watcher turn into John. John being Kiara's husband, who I haven't even talked about, but she showed up with her husband. And shortly before Mina got there, the husband left to try to escape and get help. But then he kind of did return. I'll get to it later. But anyway, a watcher turns into John and lures Daniel, and Daniel ends up being killed in both book and movie. But the other three are on the boat and they make it and they sail away. And in the morning, they pull the boat over, wait by a road, and they are picked up by a bus. And in the book in particular, Madeline and Kiara were just kind of in shock by it all. And so they're not talking at all. And so Mina takes the lead and she has the bus driver take them to her apartment. And in the book, all three of them just go to Mina's apartment and she heats up a bunch of frozen food to eat. And then they all sleep there for the night. But what bothered me is that none of them shower. They have gone months, if not years in Madeline's case, without showering. For Kiara, it's been like, what, 8 to 9 months of no showers? For Mina, it's been like 2 or 3 months. They would be showering right away, right? The next day, Mina showers and she tells Kiara like, oh, you can shower too. But Kiara is like, oh no, I'll wait till I get to my own house because I have this awesome tub that I'm really excited about. And that too, it's like, what? Kiara would have showered at Mina's house and then she would have bathed again at her own house. Like, there is no way they would have put off being able to shower after months of not being able to. They would feel so gross, so grimy. They would be showering right away. So that was just a pet peeve of mine. Like, no way they would not have showered that first night they got back. But also in the book, they're described as if they're like on the verge of death almost, because the trek to the river was so exhausting. And like I said, for months now, they have not been getting enough food. So they are very malnourished. And so I thought they would end up having to go to the hospital, but no, they just go right to Mina's apartment and I guess they're fine. And apparently her bills were on auto pay and she had enough money in her account because she hasn't been working for months and yet she hasn't been evicted and her utilities still work. And then another complaint, Kiara is the only one that has people who, like her parents and John's parents, are going to be like, it's been like 9 months. Where have you been? And John has died. So how is she going to explain that? And she says how she can't tell the truth because no one will believe the truth. But then she never comes up with like what she's going to tell them. And I get Kiara isn't the main character, but this is a huge deal. Like, you've been gone for so long and your husband has died. Like, people have been out searching for you. You show up again, your husband is gone. Like, what are you going to tell them? Like, you have to have something to tell them. And so I don't know, it felt like the author didn't know how to resolve this. And so he just never addressed it. But I did like that Mina, no one realizes that she has been gone and she's not missed at all. And so she's just such a loner who keeps to herself and doesn't care about other people. And so therefore, when she is gone, no one even notices. And what a wake-up call, right? To do something better and to actually interact with people around you. That way, next time something happens, people will actually notice. So I did like that touch. But anyway, in the book, Mina and Kiara wake up the next day and Madeline has just left. And they're like, well, I guess that's kind of just how she is, so whatever. And then from there, Kiara goes to her own home, and then Mina goes to the college to destroy Kilmarten's work so that no one else will find the woods. Whereas in the movie, like, all of these details aren't there. After the bus, they get picked up by the bus, and then I guess they just all go to their own separate places because we just see Mina show up alone in her apartment, and then the next day she goes to the college. And so in both book and movie, she goes to the college to go through Kilmarten's things, and before she destroys his work, she like kind of reads about some of what he wrote about in regards to the changelings, the watchers. And in the movie in particular, she reads that at one point, changelings and humans lived side by side peacefully. And some of them would even get married and have children. And the children were called halflings. And he has a paper he has written called like the Halfling Dilemma or something like that. And I'm not even a big Lord of the Rings fan. And yet every time they talked about halflings, all I could think of were hobbits. But while she's going through his stuff, she finds a picture of Kilmarten and his wife, who she finds out had died. died years prior. And what do you know? The wife looks like Madeline. And so she goes to see Kiara and she tells her everything she has found out. Also in the book, she goes back to her apartment and it had been ransacked by Madeline. But anyway, so she goes to talk to Kiara, and in the book, Madeline does end up showing up. They kind of have a showdown. We see Madeline transform into Mina, but ultimately Mina is able to convince her to let her and Kiara live. And then, Madeline goes her own way and they separate peacefully. And then by the end of the book, some time has passed and Mina is saying how she feels like she'll see Madeline every now and again. But then she is also noticing how there are other people who kind of have the same blank expression that Madeline had had. And then it ends with a man approaching Mina, and she can tell by his eyes that it's Madeline, just looking like someone else. And Madeline thought she was the only one that could be out in the daytime, because changelings, they only come out at night. They can't be in the light, except Madeline, who is unique. And so Madeline, looking like a man, approaches Mina, and she tells her, I was wrong. I am not the only one. And there are actually watchers all around you, and they have been watching you. So you are not safe. And that is how the book ends. Whereas in the movie, so she goes to Kiara's and she tells her everything. But then while she's with Kiara, she sees Kiara come home and she realized who she has been talking to is Madeline. And this was something that did surprise me. But from here, she and Madeline have a showdown, and Madeline talks about how ever since she's been born, she was different from the other changelings and she's always been an outcast. And right as she is trying to kill Mina, Mina tells her, like, the reason you've always felt different is because you are different. And it is because you are a halfling. You are half human, half changeling. And so she tells Madeline, like, get in touch with your human side and let me and Kiara live. And then Madeline transforms into her true self, and then she flies away and lets Kiara and Mina live. And then we cut to the future, and Mina has reconnected with her sister and she's opening up about everything that has happened. And she tells her, like, yeah, sometimes I think Madeline is around. She looks like someone else, but I know it's her. But she doesn't say it like she's scared of her. She just kind of says, like, oh yeah, Madeline still is around. And then we cut to outside of the building. We see a young girl who is Madeline, just looking like someone else. To go back to Kilmarten, because in the movie, he talks about how he knows changelings can mimic humans. And he says how, like, wow, like this is a type of immortality in like a weird twisted way. But we see that that kind of was his intent. And that is why he brings a changeling down into the bunker with him, is because he wants to like bring his dead wife back to life in this weird way. And so he does achieve this goal, but ultimately he realizes it had been a mistake. And that is why he then tries to shoot her, but he is unsuccessful, of course. Whereas in the book, that was not his intent. He does bring a picture of his wife. And so the changelings do start to look like her and he's freaked out by it. And then we have Madeline, who ends up being able to be out in the daylight. And that is what he is talking about when he's like, wow, like I'm seeing things that can't be true. I must be going crazy. And so yeah, his intentions were a bit different from book to movie. In the movie, I almost thought it seemed to be implied that Kilmarten was Madeline's father because she's a halfling and he's the only human that's been there that we know of, and he even brought a changeling down into the bunker. But she does say that she always felt like an outcast up until Kilmarten showed up. So I guess she was born before him, which means she wouldn't be his child. So yeah, so I guess that's not the case, but I was kind of getting that vibe. But anyway. And then John, so yeah, Kiara's husband was named John, and then he leaves to escape the forest. And then at one point in both book and movie, he comes back during the night and he's knocking on the door to be let in. And he ends up being killed by the Watchers because Madeline is like, we can't open the door because then we'll all die. And in the book, I'm not sure if that really was John or a Watcher mimicking John. It seems like it might have been the real him, but I'm not sure. Whereas in the movie, when this happens, it seems pretty clear that this is a Watcher mimicking John because Kiara asks him a question that only he could know the answer to, and he is unable to answer it. But when it comes to book versus movie, so Madeline being a changeling in the book was so obvious, and so very early on I knew that was going to be the case, and so when that is revealed, it was not surprising at all. And then the ending also I just didn't really like. I was hoping it would be a situation where we would be left seeing Mina but not knowing if it really was Mina or if it was Madeline looking like Mina. Like I was hoping it would be ambiguous in that way. But yeah, the ending we got, I just felt disappointed by. He is setting it up for a sequel because there is a sequel coming out later this year, which I will not be reading. If you have read it, if you're seeing this video in the future and you've read that book, comment down below letting me know. But yeah, the ending I just felt was kind of lackluster, I guess. And the ending in the movie is also very lackluster and also cheesy with her talking to her sister. But yeah, I didn't find either book or movie very engaging. I didn't care about the characters in either book or movie. And in the book, we even get scenes from each character's perspective. And so I guess that kind of helps you get to know them. But even so, I didn't care too much about any of them. And in the movie, it's a movie about 4 people. That should be such an isolating isolated group that we should get such a good feel for each of them, and yet they all feel so one-dimensional. And there's also parts in the movie where we get voiceover by Dakota Fanning, and there's also parts where Mina is talking to herself as a way to explain to the audience what she's feeling, and all of these things felt unnecessary. And again, the movie just took itself so seriously, and yet it was just so silly and so cheesy. And so as much as I didn't like the book and I didn't feel invested in the story, yeah, I was very disappointed. And yet the movie I was even more disappointed by, because it is a cool premise. Like, there was potential here with this story that we had in the book, and like folklore horror is a cool genre, and then them being watched by them in this weird situation with the double-sided glass, like that could have been really cool if they just made some changes, but they didn't make the right changes, and they just kind of made a bad book even worse, in my opinion. And so yeah, even I'm gonna say the book wins, and yet at the same time I did not like this book and I wouldn't recommend it. So yeah, that wraps up my video on The Watchers. Sorry this was more of a negative review, but again, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Let me know if you disagree. Maybe you can convince me that the book or movie is better than I think it is, but yeah, I just wasn't a fan of either one. I thought both of them were just poorly done and went in a very disappointing direction, in a very predictable direction. And I wanted more depth to this story and to the characters, and we just didn't get that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you next time. Bye.